All right, it is a little bit after 6 p.m. here on Tuesday, November the 12th, 2019. We'll call to order this meeting of the Murphysboro City Council. I'd ask that we would all rise. We have in attendance with us the pastor at First Christian Church, Pastor Bryce Pitlick. We would give him an opportunity to introduce himself and then lead us in an invocation.
All right. I'm Bryce Pitlick. I got to meet some of you just a few minutes ago. Lived down here in Southern Illinois for 4 years now, and just became the pastor here at First Christian Church on 15th and Pine Street about 9 months ago. I'm excited to be the pastor there. I'm excited about things in the future in the church. Hoping to get our church more involved in the community these next several years. So thank you for letting me be here tonight.
All right, thank you.
That's great. Father, we thank you, Lord, for this evening. We thank you, Father, for places that we can stay that are warm in this cold weather that we've had today. I thank you so much, Lord, for the grace and mercy that you show to us, and I want to ask a blessing over this meeting tonight. I pray that you be with each and every person here, and I pray, Father, for your wisdom that only you give, Lord. And I am grateful, Father, that you're willing to listen to us, and we just call on you and on who you are. I pray that the things that are talked about here tonight are things in which will better this community and the city of Murphysboro and the people here that I know all these people in this room care about. We thank you so much, and we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
These chairs are nice, but they're...
I think that's what the last meeting.
All right, Clerk Hunsaker, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Hughes. Alderman Curry Whitson. Alderman Brown. Alderman Pearson.
Here.
Alderman McCollum. Alderman Irvis.
Here.
Alderman Bratton.
Here.
Alderman Bastian.
Here.
Alderman Campbell. Here. Alderman Pittman.
Here.
Mayor Stevens.
Here. Thank you all for your attendance this evening. We'll go ahead and get into our agenda items for tonight's meeting. Up first, we have the consideration of council minutes from October 29th, 2019. I'd entertain any questions or amendments to the minutes at this time. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Up next, we have the consideration of accounts payable registers. And you'll notice that we also have some change order requests there. Sort of agendaed it in this way because we always do the accounts payable, which those are included there, and then we have this as a separate item later, and then we all say, well, hey, didn't we already pay those? And so I thought it would be good just to have that discussion all at once and avoid a little confusion later. So first off, any questions on the payable register list 819? All right, hearing no,
I had one, I'm sorry.
Mr. Pearson?
I wasn't paying attention. Phosphorus removal, what is that?
That was a requirement of the city's MPDS permit. That's the permit that governs the wastewater plant.
Okay.
Any other questions? I entertain a motion to pay the bills. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Got a plane to catch tonight, Danny? or-
No, no.
I was thinking the same thing, Mayor.
I can think of a few things to talk about, though, if you want me to.
I'm sorry,
Stay
Lord
away.
forgive me.
Me and Rodney just don't get no respect.
Yeah. All right, we have a couple of change orders, as I just momentarily, a moment ago mentioned. I'd turn this over to Mr. Sheffer if he wants to give us any more detail on these beyond what we have presented here.
No, this is on the 20th Street Overlay Project contract with E.T. Simons. If you'll remember, we took bids, and the original bid was $216,524.62, and we did do some negotiating with them, and the end all, the project total amount came in at $188,292.92. So this change order is for a deduct of $28,231.71.
All right, is there a motion to approve the change order?
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we need two motions on these two items?
Probably should, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the second one, then accordingly with that change order approval, is pay estimate number one, which is the final pay estimate to E.T. Simon in the amount of $188,292.92.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for that. That takes us into our regular committee and commission reports. We have first, Budget and Finance, chaired by W.J. Pittman. W.J.?
Thank you, Mayor. We have no items under old business. Under new business, we have a reminder that this Thursday, 6 o'clock, we have a budget committee meeting. We should all have in front of you a copy of the budget and go over that on Thursday.
Let me make everybody happy. I can't attend.
Oh, my God.
I'm sure we'll have detailed notes from you on.
Yes.
Alright. Second item is the approval of the line of credit renewal at First Bank and Trust Company.
Is this $500,000?
At 5%.
Okay.
0.
So moved.
Second.
We have motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is presentation of TIF receivers. Second to Mr. Moran.
Correct.
Sorry to slow you guys down. How are you guys doing tonight?
Alright.
Thank
Hope
you.
you're doing well. Again, my name is Steve Moran with Moran Economic Development. We assisted you guys in the creation of your downtown TIF district. And all went well, and thank you guys for allowing us to work with you through that process and onward and forward. Again, thank you, Sandra, for all your help that you provided during this process as well. Now, what we're here to kind of talk about is one thing to have a TIF. It's another thing to make that TIF district successful, kind of sort of a motto around our company. And so what we'd like to be able to do is to start helping you guys work projects within the TIF district. I know you got your TIF number one, which kind of is a project in and of itself, but this TIF district's more or less built to really, there's going to be multiple projects coming out of this TIF district if we're lucky. If we get the kind of investment that we hope to have in our downtown area, I could see all kinds of deals over the span of 23 years that we could make with those folks interested in investing in buildings, creating jobs, those types of things, and what basically our TIF is intended to do. And so, to ensure I go along with the agenda, I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys about how to work projects. And I was going to make this somewhat just conversational, and if we needed to talk more later, but our firm works all over the state of Illinois and administering folks as TIF districts. And so we've got a real good structure, a good template to help folks manage their TIF district areas. We think it's a little less expensive. Keeps you guys, helps keep you guys out of quote unquote TIF jail. Make sure that we're abiding by TIF statutes. we've been around the block, helping you guys realize real projects from non-real projects. What we do is look at economic impacts and things that I'll go in line with. But I just kind of wanted to quickly go through, some of your project steps, typical project steps that many cities are taking to help work a project. And we do have a project, Mr. Feaster, yes, that's what I'm gonna do. We do have a project, so we'll put some real world numbers and facts and figures to what I'm gonna say here shortly. But typically what's going to happen now that you have your TIF, and we thought we'd generate some interest pretty quick, and we have, and I have a feeling we'll generate more. But typically, a business or a developer or would-be investor is going to approach the city about TIF incentives for a potential project. That can come through the mayor, can come through Sandy, can come through any normal avenue. What you then do is you have that designated staff person take the lead on the project to determine if it would, to see if there's any determination of TIF funding. What you then do is you issue a TIF application. This is my strong suggestion, whether you hire us or not, to help with that. I've created one for Mr. Feaster's project, but I wouldn't get two more. You always want them to fill out the application, and you want them to fill that application before they take a hammer to a nail or stick a shovel in the ground, okay? Because ultimately there's a big but-for requirement in TIF, as you guys have probably heard, meaning but for the city granting me or giving me some assistance, this project wouldn't happen. And so you want that application then turned back into the designated staff. Oftentimes what would happen is it might come to Sandy, might come to the mayor, who gives it to us. We work with that person because maybe this is a big project. Maybe we want someone, who knows what that project might be. So we work with that person on filling out that application, make sure it's complete, that we get the kind of information that you guys are going to want to see to make a decision on whether or not to give funding for it. Oftentimes we can make recommendations for other areas that funding might help. Obviously your enterprise zone, maybe there's some other funding mechanisms out there or other things that we can bring into the project to help make that project come to fruition. Then often what we do is we look at the application, we run some economic impact figures. What's this thing going to generate in property taxes? What's it going to generate in future TIF revenue? Is it a sales tax generator? How many jobs are created or retained? Are we removing some blight? That unfortunately we had more blight in our area than we wanted. Are they knocking down an unsafe building? Are they doing what's the desirability of the project? Is there beautification of it? All those types of things that you guys would want to see to determine whether or not you want to make an appropriation in TIF for it. We then issue that evaluation, which I'll show you a sample of here shortly. And you guys decide, okay, how are we going to give money for this project and what are we going to give the money for? What I will sidebar is that when you guys rebate money, most of the time early on in your TIF process, it's going to be through a property tax rebate is how you're going to help. So monies that are generated into your TIF fund from that project are then going to be rebated back to that person or developer or investor for certain costs of that project that they incurred at the outset. Okay, and I'll kind of explain. Like I said, once I go over a piece of project. Let's say you want to rebate 60% for 15 years, not to exceed $10,000 of eligible costs. We take that, we have that evaluation for you, you make that recommendation. Then what we would do is we draw up an agreement through the help of your attorney. And then that agreement would then be passed via resolution or ordinance at the following city council meeting, outlining the terms and conditions of that incentive. So basically what happens is that project comes here, fills out an application, we do a review of that project, we share that with you guys, you determine how much money, if any, we're going to give to that project and for what. Should that satisfy the agreement? Should that satisfy the developer or investor? We put those terms down on paper, and it comes back to you for final approval, and then the project can begin. There are times when we can do what's called an induced resolution to help speed up the project, but for the most part, kind of go through how I just mentioned it there in those steps. And so that's how a lot of folks are doing. When you read in the paper how Marion's doing their deals, or Smith's doing their deals, or Carterville's doing their deals within, that, this is largely how those deals are being done, okay? If you wanted to break off into a future committee meeting, there's ways to keep my costs down. Drive time is always a good way to keep me down, keep, you know, we do a lot via email or at a committee level or speakerphone or those types of things, which I'm happy to do. But we try to be efficient with you guys. We, like I said, I want to be pointing to this TIP district 10 years from now and saying, look what we formed that TIP and this is what it accomplished. You know, kind of like what we do all over Southern Illinois and our references kind of stand for. So that's the general process for running and making your TIP program successful. We would help recoup your costs through the TIP agreement process too, and I can kind of talk about that. Meaning, if you're going to give 10,000, they might only make 9,500 back because you'll keep. I don't get any money out of it. I charge you guys. You guys run the program, and then you make it back through the administrative fees in the agreement, and I'll show you that later. We do try to do some things to alleviate your costs on the front end. And so, agenda-wise, that's kind of the general procedures. And are there any questions in terms of the procedures? It might actually help when I have a real project once we get down a little further.
Brad?
What is the cost from you? Is it based on a percentage?
No,
Or is
no,
it a
that's-
flat fee, is it an hourly?
We do hourly, and so basically, you engage us, we're not on a retainer. If you wanted a retainer type of structure, we could do that, or not to exceed. And you know what, I was probably supposed to come up with that alternative, but I actually did not.
Okay.
We work, generally speaking, we work hourly.
Okay.
And so, let's say an application comes to the mayor, he wants me to take a look at it, or you guys want me to take a look at it, we work hourly. And so if there are no projects, we're not charging you for anything. We got an abundance of projects, that's good, because obviously it's gonna generate revenue for you, most likely, or it's gonna be achieving some goal or objective of your TIP, and then we just charge you hourly.
Okay, so that is a charge to the city,
Yes, it is.
okay?
I mean, if we wanted to get creative with things, yeah, I mean, I get that on the onset, it's a little tough, but once your TIP starts to mature and you have some TIP monies, that's when you're using those monies to pay down administrative expenses of your TIP.
I guess when you come back with this other alternative, with an estimate of the cost not to exceed XYZ dollars, you'll also give us a dollar amount per hour.
Well, that is what's next, actually.
Okay, okay.
On the agenda, we do have an actual contract that we do. Typical projects that would take off from initial review to your review to the agreement. It's 4 to 6 hours of work. You know, our larger scale projects are gonna be more than that, obviously. Our smaller projects, I'm not interested in billing hours or charging you 0.2 for a phone call and all that stuff. It's not like that at all. If the project's not real, we're not gonna work it or do anything else. We're interested in helping you guys get efficient with your time and with TIP. And so the following agenda item is an outline of our where's that at? Is our contract that we've got for your approval if you want. No, here it is.
Cool.
So we'd be happy to do more than just work typical projects. Let's say you guys wanted us to do some marketing, everything's kind of falls under the umbrella. And we only do something through a written communication of the city. So let's pretend you wanted us to work a project, we're gonna go ahead and work that project, we're gonna do all those steps and bring it to council. But let's say you wanted us to market the city to outside investors. We wanted to do some mapping, maybe some brochures, some of those things. We could do that as well. Maybe we put together a site search proposal. Let's say you wanted us to do some pretty intensive economic impact projections based on a new road that you're doing or some other capital intensive project. We could do economic impact projections, help you guys make decisions. projects, do TIF agreements. We can also help you with your reports, obviously, like China's covered there, but you guys so far handled that, so this is fine. And so, basically, anything economic development, TIF wise, we're happy to help you guys out, and we'll help you work the project, along the way. It might stink early on, but as we get more efficient, so will any sort of the hourly work and whatnot. I mean, as we kind of understand how these works and how a typical project's gonna work, it'll make it, I mean, it's been successful, this method, with a lot of folks that we work for.
I think one of the things that I'm looking for is the guidance in terms of what's typical based upon your experience. That's where, to me, the value to the city is, because having, as a council, never dealt with a multitude of parcels like there are in this TIF, there's a potential for a lot of people to be coming to the city and inquiring and asking and proposing things. And being able to, you know, compare that to something that's being done of a similar nature in another community is the invaluable kind of advice I think that you can lend in this situation. And, you know, the other question I suppose I have is, whenever you're administering a TIF in here in Illinois, is there a boilerplate kind of stance that communities are typically taking with each project initially? Like they say, you know, this is what we generally do. We rebate X amount of dollars up to a certain amount of money for a certain period of time, and that's just they initially give to everybody, or are they approaching each thing truly individually?
Good. Definitely the right questions, and we do help you with those things. I mean, for instance, our project tonight is a good solid project. There's potential for a new coffee shop, ice cream parlor, those types of things, something I think a lot of citizens would like. Plus, we get the full rehab of a building that's currently vacant and not in very good shape. That project very likely calls for a few more incentives than does maybe the tearing down a structure and building storage sheds, for instance, which don't employ anybody. Yeah, they generate a little bit of TIF money, but in reality, not some of the amenities that this project might do. And so we do, during our evaluation process, we do bring those types of things up. Early on in the TIF, you can't do grants because you don't have any TIF money. So, you know, in time, what happens, and as you get folks to invest, your TIF money is going to grow, and you're going to rebate some of that money back, and then you'll keep the other portion of it to use elsewhere in your TIF district area. Okay, so let's say you get a project that's going to generate $1,000 in TIF monies along the way, and you're going to give them, it's 60% of that. You would you rebate 600, you keep that 400, and that 400 gets spent somewhere else in the TIF for maybe public improvements or sidewalks, water line replacement, those kind of things. Then as time goes on, you know, you can create a facade improvement program, and we talked about that. So what you do is maybe allocate $20,000 and say, okay, we're going to give direct grants to projects that improve the facades on a first come, first served basis. You know, so you're running it like that. So the idea is to get your program growing, and so the only way you can do that now is through a rebate of funds that are generated on an incremental basis, basically that are generated after someone invests in the TIF and is then taxed as a result of those improvements. Which, by the way, they may be taxed no matter what. TIF doesn't cause their taxes to go up; it's the improvement that they made is why they go up. And so, so a rebate first, and so you do everything on a rebate. So, so that, let's say we don't know it's going to be 1,000. Let's say 1 year it's going to be 1,100. Well, it'll be 60% of that 1,100. Or let's say the next year it went to 900. It wasn't 1,000. It'd be 60% of that 900. So we always kind of help you guys from an obligation standpoint. You're never over obligating yourselves. To, generally speaking, 50 to 75% is the percentage that a lot of folks in your neighborhood are doing. For, most folks are not going more than 15 years on any type of deal, and all deals have an endpoint. So it's a percentage of the increment that's generated based on their improvement, And I think a good, Heron does 60. Carterville does that, or 75. West Frankfort will do 75.
But if a council wanted to, on any particular project, you could do 100%.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
So there is some discretion, but that's where the economic impact comes into play.
Sure.
And some of them aren't worth it. Some of them, I mean, some projects you're gonna say no. Some of them might not be in the TIF.
Right.
Some of them, they don't comply with state, with building codes and other permits. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you're not gonna, enter into a TIF agreement if a developer, doesn't, it's had some issues and whatnot before.
Is there any questions from the council or Scott?
I do have one. So, let's say we do 100% or some, whatever number it's gonna be. Are there ever any problems in these other TIF districts where someone says, well, you went for 70% for this guy, but you're only offering this number to me? I mean, do you have to have consistency property to property to property, or can you do them on a individual basis depending on the merits of that property?
Can it cause issue? Yeah. I think what causes more issue though is sometimes keeping it exact, because you got your star investor, your star project getting the same as the project that probably isn't as lucrative or as.
So it's not illegal to do different
It's a
deals?
discretionary fund.
Okay.
It is a discretionary fund, but it's something that we gotta watch for, and so we where do we find our precedent? We don't really know. But what we also do is we do on a not to exceed basis too. So there are three things: the percentage of the increment, how many years, and not to exceed a certain cost. So what can happen actually is you can say, we're gonna give you 60% of the increment for 15 years, not to exceed $10,000. Well, if in year 10, you rebated $10,000, the deal ends. So then you would be like 100% of the increment. So there's ways to kind of fluctuate, pick and choose what you want to rebate for.
All right, well,
I know, it's hard. It is a lot of touch and feel.
I think that, the thing that we need to action here is whether or not we want to, first, enter into some sort of agreement with you. I know that we had the perhaps option to consider some other alternative retainer of sorts, which we don't have tonight. So, Mr. McComb, did you have something?
Yeah, is your hourly wage when you work on this $110?
Is it? Yes. Yes.
Okay, I know we've talked about a lot of stuff on finance, and I seen in here we charge $110 an hour.
Yes.
Okay.
If you, like I said, we can maybe start, and if we think there's gonna be more, I'll happily do a retainer type of system. If we're gonna get tons of projects, we can come back with another retainer.
When we enter into a contract
10 hours.
with you, are we entering into an agreement for 6 months, for 12 months, for just, any period of time?
Now, there's consultants out there that'll do that to you. You wanna stop using me, you just quit calling me.
Okay.
So it's maybe my mistake, but so far folks keep calling.
Understood. Mr. Brett?
On this particular project, it appears that you pretty well know what's going to be going on there. Can you give us a not to exceed, how many hours on this?
I'd say 4 to 6 hours.
This is gonna be our first project, and I know you want it to be good, and you'd like for us to use you all the way through. But I didn't know if the first one you kind of faded the city.
There's some freebie into it. Of course, I didn't give you the agreement template or anything like that. You could easily take this and, there's some freebiness to what we're doing here on this project.
So what was the hours not to exceed on this project again?
4 to 6 hours is a typical project from zero to, that's what I can say. I won't know all projects, but if this kind of project where it's a good application, we've been talking, chatting, I'm at a council meeting, like I said, 4 to 6 hours of work to get that, to take it into completion.
Well, it sounds like if we go ahead and vote to approve this agreement with Mr. Moran, that we're not gonna be held to anything beyond the interaction we're gonna have on this first project consideration. So it seemed to be wise to do that, and it's not a over-the-top amount of money. So, Mr. Pittman?
I mean, could we need, I mean, I guess we would still need a motion, even though it's not a contract, do we still, I mean,
It is a written contract.
it is a written
It is a
contract,
written
but there's not a
contract.
term.
Well, it provides in it, as Mr. Moran said, it's termination by the city, and can be terminated by the city at any point. That's provided in the written contract.
I would make a motion that we enter into that contract with Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Daniel.
Not to exceed 6 hours.
I will.
That's what the man said.
It's a 4 to 6, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, are you gonna redo my contract every time?
No, we're talking.
I'm just talking about this first one. Let's take this one project, see how it runs smooth and good, then we can go from there.
His not to exceed was talking about the project, not his.
That's not each
Right.
application.
Not each application, but just this one project, all I'm talking
But we're
about.
talking about the contract right now.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how you wanna organize that, but.
Well, we have a motion and a second by Alderman Pittman, Alderman Campbell to agree to the contract as presented as at an hourly wage of $110 an hour with no to exceed amount.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed? See an hour at the end of it.
All right.
So that was.
Nothing personal.
No, I understand, if this goes too much, like I said, we could switch to a retainer, make you guys feel comfortable about your allotment a month or something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
So it looks like we still have the consideration of the application submitted by Mr. Houston.
And I wanna, Mr. Easter, do you wanna speak to the council about the project just in general before we get to the nuts and bolts of the tip?
Yeah, I don't exactly know, I mean, where we're going to nuts and bolts, but as far as everything else goes, I'm Derek Feaster, live here in Murphysboro, been here about 16 years now. Wife grew up here, got kids in school here, work here, but anyways, I bought the old Murphysboro American from the Real Church, where I go to church at, and our idea is to make a hand-dipped ice cream shop and a little coffee shop in there for the community to make it, you know, a lot better than what it is. That building is really ran down. I've had a lot of bids, and I've had tuck pointing, I've had windows, I've had roofing cost, I've had electrical cost. When I bought the building, it was just basically gutted. So my cost was well over $100-something thousand just to get it up and going. That's not me. And some of them bids were me doing like the windows and stuff, which if you drive by, I mean, it's no brainer. You see the windows are falling out. It has to be done. So with that being said, you know, when I did price some material, all mine was just material. That was no labor. That's me doing the labor myself. So I'm not trying to ask for material, labor, everybody to do all the work for me. I'm planning on doing most of the work myself. Whatever the city allows me to do, I'm gonna plan on doing myself. But so with that being said, you know, it was well over $100-something thousand. I can't remember what it was. I didn't even get bids for everything that needed to be done up there. But the idea is to bring, you know, like I said, a hand-dipped ice cream shop downtown, something to make the downtown pop, you know, something for the community, bring a few jobs to the area. I don't know exactly how many it'll bring. I'm hoping 4 to 5, you know, jobs at least, you know, with that, you know, in the coffee shop. And so, I mean, if you got any questions, I don't know what else you want from me, but.
Well, I want to thank you for taking that, I know you attend Real Church, I understand, and
Yep.
you're taking that building over on a corner that sees about 6 million cars a year go by it is really important to the city, and I just really appreciate it, because I know you showed me around there, and it's a very historic building. Used to be an opera house.
Yep.
And the center portion of the ceiling is very ornate, and so being able to have somebody like yourself with the skills to help, you know, extend its life is important to just preserving the character of the community. So thank you.
I have a question. I know that that is a historical building. Are you gonna be able to keep it as a historical allocation, or because of remodeling and work that it needs to be done, we'll lose that status, you know that?
Well, I mean, as far as when I bought it, it was just basically all just brick walls in there. There was
Yeah.
nothing else, I mean, except for like the mayor said, in the upper part, the old tin and stuff like that is just, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And I'm planning on leaving that all up there and stuff. The downstairs is just that white tin, it's all rusted and everything, so I'm just gonna put a drop ceiling in it and cover it up. We're gonna leave one wall all brick, kind of live it, you know, give it the same look. The other one may end up putting plaster over, so it's kind of falling apart. So I'm gonna have to frame all that up and do away with it, because there's no way to actually just get to the brick and save it all with all the plaster that was on it. But as far as trying to save as much as I can, yes, I'm planning on saving as much as I can. I'm not gonna tear, you know, any of the old out.
I know you will do it,
Yeah.
I know you will. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
So what we have, thank you, it was, I mean, he did a great job on the application. You know, see, you guys know, dealing in these types of things, what you might get, in terms of, input and application process. But he did a really nice job with the application, fully outlined the project. And what we did was we prepared, an application for systems review. Where he did a nice job of obviously already outlining what the project is, where it is located, talked about the potential for 2 retail spaces and possible creation of a large benefit space and or residential apartments, bringing it back up to local code and fulfilling ADA requirements. For proposed work items, all these things are actually TIF eligible costs. So you have the ability to rebate for almost all of them. Electrical renovations, HVAC, roofing, tuck pointing, window replacement, ADA compliant access points, painting and structural repairs, flooring and plumbing throughout. Meaning, if you wanted, you could expend TIF monies for those types of costs. Because they're all rehab oriented in this particular case. And so then what we did was we, on page 2, we estimated the total cost, and what we're looking at is about $108,300. Of that $108,300, all of that's eligible cost, as I just kind of explained, meaning you have the ability to give money for it. I'm not saying you're going to, I'm just saying you have the ability to do that. We looked at typical employment, and it was estimated that 2 to 4 employees might locate out of this place when it's all said and done. We look at sales tax potential. You guys receive generally 1%, and I'd probably, you get a home roll? Yeah, and so you'd actually receive just a little bit more. So you get some general fund monies, maybe additional sales tax dollars as a result of having a new coffee shop, ice cream shop there. Right now, here's what you kind of look at. This is kind of through my example earlier, is estimated property tax and TIF revenue impact. Right now, this property generates about $3,100 in property tax revenue, and obviously none of that goes into your TIF fund. What we've estimated is that after the completion of this project and a full assessment of the improvements are made to the building, we think that it could increase by up to $2,500 more, all of which would go into the TIF fund. So the total taxable liability would go from $3,100 to $5,600, to $2,500 going into the TIF. That's our increment money. That's the money we play with. Over a 15-year period, it's going to generate $43,000 more than what it is now, and actually probably much more than that. In its current state, it's probably going to continue to go down. So on the following page, you got an opinion of the provision of assistance, which is a good, solid sort of a recap of what we were talking about, how you guys can help. So this would be an annual reimbursement of tax increment TIF revenue generated by the property. We suggest 60% of the TIF increment, which is a good median range, and a good solid starting point, I would think, based on this project. A payment term of 15 years, meaning we're going to enter into, our TIF lasts for 23 years, so this is a 15-year deal. And not to exceed 100% of the TIF eligible costs. So, so I think actually, verify that. So actually in this one, we are just going to simply do a rebate. This one gets some extra special bonuses, because now we're saying, okay, we could expend quite a bit, or we could cap it if we wanted. But the last page, or the second to last page, kind of illustrates how the TIF works. That's sort of the bread and butter here. I don't know if you guys got a color, if you're using color or not.
No.
No,
Okay, that's fine. Basically, you can see up here is where we got, $3,100 tax bill. When it's all said and done, 2,500 will be added, or the estimated tip increment here is 2,600 bucks. We show the split of 60-40. So if this were to all check out, what would happen is you'd pay 5,600, 2,500 would go into your tip fund. We would then take and let it sit for $1,500, and we keep the other 1,000 every year for the next 15 years. In the end, it winds up being, for these projections, a $25,000 incentive should everything check out, which I think is probably close. Sometimes these rehab projects don't generate a ton in tax. But this way, if it safeguards the city, so if that $2,500, let's say the first few years the tax liability doesn't go up, there's just simply nothing to rebate. But at the same time, it's also good for you, because you don't have increased tax liability for all your improvements either. And so we all hope that the investment, as you invest, you're getting some property tax relief along the way. That's what's kind of happening.
Questions, Mr. Pittman?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if, so, we enter into a tip agreement with somebody and then they sell that property,
Good question.
does that agreement continue on with the new ownership, or is that something that is null and void if that's kind of said?
Well, we'll work with your attorney on that, but oftentimes they have assignability clauses, which is not uncommon, and that provided that the same use occurs, that's not usually an issue. You'll see that with a lot of retail, like a Dollar General type project where they buy and sell those things and then sign the agreement. But we also have some go dark clauses in there. So, meaning the building goes vacant, you can stop the payment. We've got some, if they don't comply with building codes and all those other types of things, there's no payment made by you guys. There's a lot of safeguards that we will work with you and your attorney on to make sure that they're following all the rules and regulations, not only of the TIF Act, but
What are you
city
saying,
laws.
individual-
Yeah.
Individual agreement?
Yeah. And, you can get creative along the way with some of these things. I've seen deals where someone's like, I'm gonna do vinyl siding, and you're like, okay, well, I'll help with 5,000. However, we'll give you 10,000 if you do, masonite or something along. So you can get creative with your tip deals too. But we can kind of talk about those things as we move forward.
I think Mr. Feaster wanted to add something.
Yeah, I'm just kind of confused, like, okay, so with TIF, the way I'm doing my math in my head is, I do all these improvements, and then now you guys raise my taxes 3,000 or 2,500, and you're like, oh, we just charged you 2,500 because you made improvements, but we're gonna give you 1,500 of it back?
Well, the city isn't the one that raises your taxes. What's gonna happen is the assessor's gonna come, that's independent of the city. The city doesn't determine what the value of your property is.
So the assessor's not nowhere.
So if there was no TIF, the exact same thing would happen. Your taxes would go, if what we estimate, your taxes would go from 3,100 to an additional 2,500, and so you pay 5,600. No TIF, no anything. That's the assessor doing that. Okay, but what happens in our TIF scenario is because we established the TIF, we capture that 2,500, and so we're giving that back. If you didn't have the TIF, we couldn't do that.
Right.
So that's the bonus.
And then if you do the 1,500 over the whatever, it's gonna be 25,000. And then wasn't the enterprise zone, weren't they tax exempt for 5 years?
The enterprise zone, essentially, the difference between the enterprise zone and the TIF is the enterprise zone freezes your property tax payment. The TIF district does not freeze that payment. It captures the incremental increase. And then the city has the ability to divert that increase back into that TIF. And essentially, TIF allows you to sort of better direct development, not only into the private sector, but into public sector improvements in that general area to improve walkability, to improve, you know, the number of people you hope through beautification and all kinds of other things, that would be a customer of an ice cream shop or a coffee shop or these types of things. And so that's, you know, the difference. The enterprise zone freezes you for 5, gives you 50% of the newly assessed value the next 5, and then you're to your full assessed property tax payment after 10 years. The TIF district is a longer agreement, and so you kind of have to weigh out, you know, because you can't take advantage of both. You have to pick either one or the other. And they provide different incentives sort of based upon, you know, the type of project that you're doing. So, and, you know, in terms of my perspective on this particular project, I mean, picking a percentage is somewhat arbitrary, but, you know, I believe in giving people as much benefit as we can. Ms. Ripley?
I believe you said you could pick either the enterprise zone or the TIF. Being in the TIF.
Excludes the enterprise zone.
Right, for the property tax abatement portion. Sales tax and,
It's
building
still
permit.
eligible.
Right.
Thank you for correcting me on
Yeah,
that.
so you can still, yeah, sales tax.
Yeah.
Which
Questions?
adds up, almost 10%.
Yeah,
The sales tax does, yeah.
yeah, that's a quick.
Other questions from the city council at this time? Anything further, Keith?
If you were to approve this, we take it into an agreement stage, which we might make your next one, but we try and get one over to you guys, like a sample, and go over it with your attorney, so they feel good about it. But other than that, no. Like I said, you're open-ended too, that's what's also good here. You can do more than 60%, you can do less than 60%, it's up to you guys.
Mr. Pittman?
Yeah, phase 2, we can come back to.
I'm kind of with you. I mean, to me, I mean, the 60% is kind of arbitrary. To me, at this point, I don't know what, you know, I don't know what that right percentage is other than Mr. Moran's advice to, you know,
The
what
enterprise
other
zone does-
communities are doing,
does-
and I'd say that's very typical then.
You could go, I mean, at 15 years, you can go a little higher if you wanted on the percentage, if you wanted.
I would say 75%. That'd be what I
I'd be
would
good,
propose.
I'd be good with that.
And I think it'll be fair, than doing the big investment.
Yeah, and it's a historic structure, and it's,
Yeah,
It's
It's-
a pretty visible, you know,
location.
location.
and frankly, if that building is not taken care of, you know, there's a lot of traffic, and that building is right on top of 2 state highways.
Well, and like he
And-
also said earlier, it's $3,100 tax bill now, but if nothing's done to it, it could be a,
Right.
you know, $600 vacant lot tax bill in 10 years from now, you know,
Right.
so.
Mr. Bratton?
I just wanna point out one thing. If you go to 75, or if you keep it at 60, or if you make it at 20, or whatever, we are gonna set a precedent for everybody else.
And, you know, that's fine with me,
And
honestly.
I just wanna
Yeah.
point that out, you know,
Yeah, but not everybody else also is gonna be renewing, and investing in a historical.
hey, I'm all for
Yeah.
this young man and what he's doing, 100%. I just wanna point out the downside of what
I agree
could be.
with
So-
John, what do you think?
Well, you know, I don't think we're setting a precedent. I mean, it's case
Every
by
one of
case
them's gotta
basis.
come in
That's
front
right.
of us.
I mean,
every agreement's gotta
if
be-
you do 5 and
It's gonna be
75%, you're
individual.
setting a precedent, but, you know, I don't think we are. I'm not worried about that.
We're okay, I'm okay.
I mean, maybe by perception, but not by, you know.
Well, legally, you're not, no, I wouldn't encourage that.
Yeah. You know, we're not doing this.
So-
All right, do we want to direct Mr. Moran to revamp this to reflect 75% and then bring that agreement back to for us to consider at our next meeting?
I would,
We want to make that motion, somebody?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion as well.
All right, we have a motion and a second to direct Mr. Moran to amend this to 75% and have it back for our consideration at our next meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you making the trip in the cold weather. And Thank you, Mr. Peace.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your investment in the community.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you can.
All right, that's the last item under new business. Is there any public comment under budget and finance? Can we move out of budget and finance?
All right, I'm gonna slide out of here. It's like we're hosting a sweat lodge here.
Oh, God, thank
I
God.
put it down to 70.
It's down to 70.
And that's
It was
you know,
78 in there, wasn't it?
Shut it off.
we could actually be fired.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
What?
I could be fired.
Way down over here. Bought one over the weekend, so it's
Exactly. My nose.
there you go.
Okay,
All righty, let's go on.
that takes us to, Building and Grounds chaired by Mr. Gary McComb. Mr. McComb?
There's nothing under old business. Under new business, this discussion on the cemetery maintenance. Our mowing contractor is not keeping up, which I had Darren go out there with me the other day and just show him some of the stuff. He's not used any of the dirt I put out there to fill in the graves. He's not leveled the graves out. He's mowing over them, and some of them are that high, just where they were fouled up, trying to seed the grass, he just mowed over them. Those are supposed to be leveled out, that's part of his contract. That's why Charlie Nance, when he bid it the last time, he bid it several years ago, he was so high because he knew he was gonna have to bring in a tractor and everything to do that. The dirt's out there, and I bought another load of dirt for out there, but I think we're not ever gonna get it because I think that guy won't belly up. I called him several times on it, but we need to get some of the stuff, I think, if Darren's got time, he can do it. I know the reason why the city guys give up the mowing. They would go out and mow, they would get started and mow half a day. It would be something urgent for them to do, they pull off, might be 2 days, 3 days, so they get back and never felt they mowed years ago. It's something we need to cash in one of our cemetery money. I think I talked to Will about this some. If anybody would like to go out there and look at this, what we're doing, there's tombstones that's laid down, there's tombstones that's leaning like this, with the ground sunk. You know, some of them you take an engine puller with a car, a hoist, and get right over and probably pick the smaller ones up. The bigger ones, if we can set them, Darren will probably have to do it with forks and a backhoe. But it looks rough out there. I'm trying to, I called for a guy to give me a price on cutting 3 trees out there that Darren's bucket truck won't reach. And we got $6,000 left in a tree fund. I was hoping to have a bid on them for tonight's meeting. So I'm gonna try to get a bid before next meeting on those, but I would like to, we've got CDs. I'd like to cash in one of our, this is cemetery money, this is not
Yeah, I know.
cities, so I'd like to cash one of them CDs in, so we got the money to get more dirt, more rock, and see if Darren can fix some of this when they got time. And if not, try to hire some of that done out there. I mean, it looks shabby in places. The guy hadn't put the dirt in, there's holes out there, and they have burned around the graves again this year, around the tombstones, going last around them. All that needs to be replanted, seeded.
When is the cemetery maintenance contract expire? Is it expire at the end of this current,
April 30th,
in the spring of next year?
Is it first April or last April?
last April.
Okay. Well, I think we need to rebid that contract, number one, because I don't think that the person doing it currently is a qualified bidder going forward based upon the performance there. But we can cash that out when the time comes.
We do have his payment for 2 mowing, I think, still held up. And that's like $3,400, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm not for paying him that money till we figure out what it's gonna cost to do what was under his contract he's not doing.
well, he'll eventually call.
Well, they did last time,
I
we
mean-
did. And I think he's mowed 20 times this year. I'm pretty sure it's 19 or 20 times. There's one mowing left under his contract. I don't know if it's gonna need it. He don't call me, just go mow. You know, he's done that. And we held a checkup last time, he called 2 times after that, and then he quit. I mean, that's what I go through with him. But if we get those 3 trees out there too, which we done before with money left in our tree fund, I know we need to get it done if we're gonna do it. I called the guy that cut the trees before, he'll give us from up at Bigger, I believe. his
So,
name.
Gary, would you like to, have the council essentially vote to, spend up to $1,000 or something to clear out those trees, if you could get?
$1,000?
I don't know how much
I
money,
don't think $1,000 will cut one of them. Maybe those
I
are,
didn't know how big a trees were
they're
talking
big.
about.
When you go up the road and take the first turn into our cemetery, coming from bottom of the hill up, there's 3 trees right there. I had some of them cut before, but they are uprooting the road.
Do you have any idea how much you think ballpark it's gonna be?
You think they're $1,400-1,500 a tree maybe?
I would say somewhere between 12 to 1,800, just a rough estimate.
So $5,000 and under, maybe?
Probably.
I do know that we've got, it's approximately $6,000 left in the tree fund for the year, so that's kind of where we jumped off of. I don't have an exact hard number on that.
Okay. Mr. Bratton?
Mr. Edgar, is that who you said?
Edgar was his last name.
Okay. Are we gonna get a price from, Bobby Rope, who does our other stuff around town?
The reason why they call it Bobby Road, it's gotta be done now, not next year. You know what I'm saying? Bobby does a good job cutting trees for us cheap, but he don't cut them till he needs money. In other words, if we're gonna use that tree fund, it has to be used before the new budget. Or we,
Tell him that, he'll
Can you
get on
talk
it.
I
to
think-
him?
I think you tell him that, he'll get on
I'd
it.
like to, I mean, he does the other stuff for us and does it pretty quick. I'd at least like to have him, but put a deadline on when it's gotta be completed, but I think we owe him that much.
well, I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time I had trees cut out there, I had one gentleman admit it, we didn't have enough money to, what he wanted, I called this guy from Neva, he was down there and cut them down, we still had money left in the tree.
Yeah, well, that's good. No, you do a great job on that.
I will have, I mean,
Well,
I'll-
Gary, would you gather some
I'll
kids?
have Leanna get a hold of Mr. Rowe. I
Okay.
think she knows him.
Now, the last thing on this that I want to get clear is that I had an individual whose grandfather is buried at Tower Grove Cemetery call and say that his grandfather's grave was, shifted over to one side and had sunk, the actual tombstone had. And so I went out and found it and looked at it, and that is the case. I don't know what it would cost to fix those things, and as I understand it, we don't know really who over the years paid into the perpetual maintenance fund of the cemetery. We just don't have good records on that. And I've never authorized Darren or any of our city workers to go work in the cemetery and spend money to fix individual people's graves, because honestly, in 6 years of being mayor, nobody has ever approached me about this. But this person has, and I forget his last name is Holder. And so we have, I think, $17,000 in that perpetual maintenance fund. And I would like to be able to, as time allows, direct our public works crew to assess these, and whether it be we hire somebody to do it, or if we think we can do it ourselves. But I just wanted to clue the council in and get a little bit of guidance on how you'd like me to proceed with these kinds of requests.
Will, is it the grave sinking or the marker?
It is the marker, it's the headstone. is
Well,
what I
that's the
should
only
say.
way, I mean, in the winter's the best time to do it, I guess. You gotta put a strap under them and pick them up.
Right,
And then I noticed most of the guys that set them, they use that fine gravel on them, don't they, Darren?
You know, I don't know, I've been out there a few times where they've just poured the base for the headstones, so they just normally dig a footing, set a form on it and pour it.
There's some on the left, just after you go past those trees down that little hill and up on the, I watched them set them, of course, they're smaller ones, you know. A lot of those, like I say, with that engine puller, you can get over them small ones and pick them straight up and level them out by strapping them. And the only other way, I don't know if Darren's got forks or not, but you can put straps on them. You wanna stay away from anything you can of scratching on, which I had the lady call me from Nana, she come up, I finally went out and done her grandfather's grave myself. I weed eated it, I straightened everything out on it. She come up, take a picture of it, said, well, there, it was that way again, so I just went out and done it myself. And,
my question for Scott Evans is this, if we would approve doing maintenance on a headstone like that had sunk, and we would, spend that money, is that money in the perpetual maintenance fund spendable, or it's in those CDs, or, I mean?
No, the last CD that was in was, matured a few months back, so I think that whole amount is in the checking account now,
Okay.
17, so. And we've done this before, we have some precedent here. When we did the block retaining wall at the city cemetery, I don't know, it was $14,000 or $15,000, something like that. We took that all out of that fund at that time, and there was another time we did something else in that fund, so, yeah, it's, that's what it's for essentially.
All right.
Scott, didn't we take the money out of that fund when I hired, the older gentleman, John, to come down
I
and
believe
do
we-
the old tombstone?
Yes, I believe we did. Yes.
Well, I didn't
Well-
hire him, we hired him, but.
No,
I will do some more research, I'll get a company to give me a bid on what it would cost to fix that, get back to the council, and then I'll get with Darren and see if he thinks it's something we could do fairly easily or not.
And if it's something we can get during this budget process, we could go ahead and throw it in the cemetery fund budget for, 2020, and then it's there, and everybody knows about it, and it's budgeted, so.
Okay. All right.
I appreciate the input on that. And then the other, the tax sale property. I don't have a list of these properties. I know they were talking about the old American Legion up here, but I don't know why we want anything to do with those buildings. We've got into that with the school over there, Washington School, so beyond our means, the city can clean it up now. I don't know how we're gonna turn that on the shoe factory, but that was money well spent getting it down. I don't know why these tax people buy these places and on sight unseen. And then when they decide that they get a demo motion on it, they go back and the county gives them their money back. I mean, if the house is gonna be tore down, I guess maybe we ought to take that property over for that, but otherwise we have to go to court and do everything. But if we could get a list of those properties from Mr. Kennedy, the addresses and stuff, then I think we should probably put that on the, when is, we got an over tax sale by?
Thank you for coming up relatively.
I've got Eric a list of properties that are cut, that the Jackson County trustee has title to that will be coming up for sale there, which I believe is later this month.
I have some of these real estate cards right here, and it says that the sealed bid auction ends on Friday, November the 15th.
It's now, and I know there are 3 houses that we have interest in because we have sent the demos out, I believe. I think, and I, of course, don't have the list with me right now.
Well, some of these here, one includes 617 Chestnut. This is a one-story frame home adjacent to a property that we tore down. It's not far from St. Andrew's Church and school. Gina, I know you were the one that set these on my desk. I'm not sure, these liens, was this note from you?
Yes,
Okay.
those are all the liens that we have on that individual property, so we have
Okay.
a total lien on the, over $8,200.
So we have a $8,359.50 lien on 2115 Alexander, which is a vacant lot. The one with the one-story frame near St. Andrews, we have liens totaling about $1,200 there. And of course, you know, these properties are in the hands of the trustee. And
Now, the one on Alexander, the one that the lady was gonna buy that got
Passed
killed in
away.
a car wreck.
Right. So, any other questions from anybody? I mean, I wouldn't have any issue moving forward with this one at Chestnut Street because of the fact that the church has made such an investment in, you know, the school there and, you know, there is a lot of activity around there and just generally that's a ugly, beat up, messed up, boarded up house, you know, that nobody is going to, do anything with, but I do think that St. Andrews may have some interest in it.
Do,
Are those notices of properties coming up for the tax, the Jackson County Trustees tax sale, or are these notices of tax sale proceedings ongoing that the trustee has petitioned for tax deed?
Says real estate for sale starting at $791. Jackson
Okay,
County
okay.
is selling real estate that may be of interest to you. Assessment records indicate this is near property you now own. This item will be sold by sealed bid auction ending on Friday, February the 15th.
if we own it, then why would there be any taxes, you know?
We don't.
We don't, it's property, we already own a lot adjacent to those.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, clean it up around that little, the Catholic school and the church we need to do. There's no way we tear down a house, we're gonna get anywhere near the money we got back out of the lot. We all know that starting out. But if this has to be turned in by this Friday,
Yes.
is there ain't gonna be a work tomorrow? Could we get the ones tomorrow that he wants and, talk about it Thursday after this, budget finance meeting, so we can get it in by Friday?
Mr. Blake?
In general, when working with the Jackson County trustee, since this is a municipality, if these are properties that the city has sent out notices before to demolish or repair, then the Jackson County trustee in general will sell those properties to the city for their costs, rather than the city engaging in the bidding process itself. So,
That's what they did before, I believe.
yes, they've done it in the past.
Like,
So,
Well,
we-
when I'm talking about, you know, I know that Greg was wondering about, I think, the old American Legion building, Murphy's building, is coming up for taxes.
And that one, that one, I think they're just delinquent on the taxes now. It may have sold the tax sale, but no one has the actual tax deed on it yet.
Well, I know
So
that-
from the notice that the mayor just read, that's one that the Jackson County trustee has completed the process and they have title to now.
Well, no, I don't think we want anything to do with that building.
No,
Okay,
honestly,
that's
the only one of these properties that I think we ought to have any interest in is 617 Chestnut Street. The rest of these are vacant lots. And, you know, in terms of vacant lots, you know, we're probably mowing most of these. But the fact is this one, I know would help just improve the look of that area. Which
They
is-
don't have to satisfy our liens, do they?
No.
They're buying.
If the Jackson County trustee has gotten the deed, they've already extinguished the city's lien. They would have mailed out notice to the city that there's a time frame within which to object to the court if the city wanted to protect its lien, and that if they're advertising it for sale, the city's lien is no longer valid.
Mr. Pittman?
I would say the one benefit to purchasing a vacant lot, especially if we're mowing them already, is we could then try to put them into our mow-to-own program, as if we own them. Or if we don't, you know, we're mowing for somebody else anyway.
Or try to sell them to some other,
Or,
Well,
yeah, the
We haven't
adjacent
been real
property.
successful doing
The thing
that.
about it, if we end up with a vacant lot, we've been
We'll
mowing,
make that deal.
and that mowing, if somebody buys it, then we can at least write the tickets if they don't take care of it. But the lot you're talking about down there, we wanna go ahead on that one. I'd entertain a motion on it.
all right. Does anybody wanna make a motion to buy 617 Chestnut Street?
I will.
Yeah. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeas, nays, you got it.
It's yours.
All right, proud owner.
Congratulations.
You just bought it, Will.
You get to know it.
Yes, absolutely. That yard's about the size of a postage stamp, so it won't take long.
Is there any public comment on building and grounds? And we can now building and grounds.
Thank you, Mr. McComb. Takes Community Relations Chairman, Mr. John Irvis.
Thank you, Mayor. We have, excuse me, we have no old business. We have 2 items of new business, update from Joe Capias on hotel development. I think he was maybe gonna attend, but I guess not able to.
I spoke to Joe today, and a number of different things I learned today. One is that a contractor came into the Public Works office last Friday, I guess asking questions about what permits he needs to start pouring footings, because he's ready to go down there and start pouring footings. And so I spoke with Joe Capias today, and interestingly enough, he said that he had not officially, finally awarded that contract, and so I'm not sure if he was just being coy or what the case was there. But apparently, there are contractors inquiring about what it's gonna take to start construction very soon. I also know that there was a contractor today, I understand, who has received a contract to do all the plumbing work on the hotel. And Ameren is getting ready to move some utility poles that go across the highway as a part of the entry construction. And so that's really what I know. I do have some new-ish drawings from Joe's engineer, although they don't detail much more than what we had seen before, and I'll pass those down and you can review those. So that is everything that I know at this time. On the hotel development, there seems to be continued motion there, and I hope that it leads to some real action soon. I wish I had more to tell you.
Well, I thought they were gonna start the road, entrance road.
You know, I thought they were as well, and I promise I never pass along to you anything that is not what's told to me at the time, and time goes by.
We know that it's there, we know that it's coming.
On a different project, but a more, I don't know, positive note, Kerwood and Solar Alliance received their loan approval for $30 million last Friday to move forward with the work that they're gonna do there, so.
Dan co-signed on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I got it by my front pocket and gave it to him. Yeah.
So, that was good news. Guys, I wish I had more to report for you on the Solid End, that's all I have.
That's a lot,
Thank you for the update.
more than that.
Second, consideration of street closures for the hometown Christmas festivities. We have a letter and a map in the packet.
I would make that motion. Fine.
The only thing I had a question in their letter is, can we designate handicap parking spots in the library parking lot, or just?
We did it last year. We did
I
it
think they
last
just
year,
put
last year
signs
was,
up there.
yeah.
Kinda like they do for Apple Festival.
So move.
For a second,
I'll second.
any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank them for the detailed map and such, makes it much easier to visualize.
They do a good job.
Any public comment on community relations? Move on.
All right, we'll go to public improvement, chaired by Mr. Mike Bastian.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item under old business is the old depot. It's my understanding that it's the same. I do know that the mayor had indicated that he had spoken to Martin, and he felt confident that there were gonna be some improvements. I don't know if anybody's heard anything.
I have not since that time, but I have renewed reason to think that there's gonna be some real improvement there.
Okay, well, good. Have you heard anything?
I got a phone call from Martin last week, and the only thing he wanted to relay to me was that, there was gonna be somebody taking care of the roof. He's got it worked out to where we're gonna get that roof on yet this year.
Okay. The next item is North 17th Street. It's the same, Mr. Beckman is still working on it. The mayor did ask if he could put some slats in the chain link fence. I don't know if anybody reached out to him about that or not.
I believe Eric spoke with him, but I'm not sure what the results were. Eric had to leave early these days.
Okay, so maybe the next time we could get an update on that, or we'll see if that happens. South 14th Street, the last meeting, Alderman Bratton had indicated that, there was too much rain to work on it. I assume that with the bad weather, it's still the same, no progress?
I haven't been down there this weekend, but I would assume that.
Okay.
It does look 150% better than it did.
Okay, good. North 19th Street, Mr. Cripps is still hauling scrap off a little at a time, so I did drive by there, and it does look like he has made quite a bit of improvement on that. 902, 908 Locust Street. It's my understanding from Public Works that 902 is up for taxes, and 908 is the same. There's been no progress on it unless anybody else knows anything about it. Yes.
Can I ask on the North 19th Street, I mean, he did what we asked as far as putting the slats in the fence there, right? And then he's got the outside of that fence area cleaned up too, right?
Yeah.
Can we take that one off of the agenda? If
I
he's
think the only
just
thing he
working
doesn't have
on-
is on the gate. He doesn't have that fabric on the gate.
And there was some scraps that was sitting outside, but I believe all that's been removed. So I'll take a look at it, and then I'll let Sandra know if we want to take it off, if that's okay. We discussed 335 North 22nd Street. That's where the city went down and cleaned that up. It is up for taxes as well. It was also brought to my attention by Alderwoman Campos that the outside of the police station needs an uplift, and she said she has spoken to the chief. So at this time, I'm gonna turn it over to Alderman Campos.
I talked to Chief and said, that green has to go, guys. Those, we can put some sockle and paint or something, but it needs an uplift. The city is beautiful, and we have a green that it reminds me of all hospitals. So can we do something about it? I mean, let's take pride in our town, in our police and fire station.
I don't disagree. I had a resident tell me the other day, every time he sits in this lobby, he feel like he's in the start of a Stephen King movie. And so, you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess, but, I mean, if there's some way we can, you know, improve the faded look of that or something, I'm not opposed to it. Chief, you're sitting there like with lots to say.
I spoke with Sandra about it, and we haven't went any farther than that, so I think everybody needs to have some input to Sandra and I, and then I think we can go from there since it falls under building and grounds, which is her area. But I'm
When did that
completely,
become your area?
I'm open to a used building, a new building, a cook portable warehouse, whatever we gotta have to make it look better.
All right.
Just that green.
Bring us a grant, chief. bring us a grant. No, I'm talking to you.
We can talk about that a little bit after.
Okay.
I'll remind you of something.
I don't think it will break the city to invest a little bit. That range that we have over there, all over the building, that reminds me of the '60s, the mental hospitals, that I was never there, but you know, it have nothing to do with Murphysboro, that is red, a beautiful apple. So if we put something like a that styrofoam and they spray thingy and looks very, another city hall, another chief of police, I mean, another police station, and everybody will be so happy to come and visit us.
Nobody likes to go to the police station.
It doesn't matter, but it will look pretty.
We'll talk, we'll keep that on
Yeah,
the agenda for the next one.
please.
There are no other items under old business, you're welcome. Under new business, we have none. I do wanna bring this up, I know it's a sore subject, but if we're gonna make Mr. Beckman put some slats in his fencing, we need to put some slats in that fencing up on 17th and Walnut Street as well, where they used to have the yard sales. I've had a lot of complaints about that, so I'm just throwing that out there for a little bit of thought. And I'm gonna ask that that be put on the agenda for the next meeting.
We have the truck with our names, what are you looking for?
I don't care, I mean, you're worried about what the police station looks like, that looks like a whatever, but anyway, I would like that on the agenda, Sandra, for the next meeting if we could. Do we have any other comments from the alderman?
Mr., this question from Mr. Attorney Blake, are we currently engaged in any sort of ongoing litigation with Mr. Wisely?
Yes, we are.
And what is is there?
That is a Freedom of Information Act violation case that he filed, which is based upon his requests for, and this case kind of sat idle for a long time. It was filed while his ordinance violation case was ongoing. He made requests for city council meeting audio tapes for a year's worth. He initially requested one meeting, which was the June meeting in which the ordinance was discussed. That was passed in that meeting. There were issues in getting the audios off of the recording mechanism. If Brian was here, he could explain to you better what the difficulties were. I guess at the time the recorder being used did not separate, there was not a separation out of what was regular meeting, the regular meeting recordings and executive meeting recordings. So there was a long process, there was a process involved in figuring out how it gets downloaded from this recorder down to a computer where things can be gone through to where then they can be separated out, which it went through a long process. Eventually, Ben Reed figured out how to do it for the one meeting. Then Mr. Beckman came back, Mr. Wisely came back requesting a year's worth of these meetings. It took Ben Reed several hours to do one meeting. It was been working with Brian, trying to get it figured out. It went over the course of several months trying to get this done. Eventually, the executive session minutes at issue in the various meetings got released, so it turned out to fix itself. It turned out Brian going through everything and figuring this out in the process. That's the big dispute on, or that's the big issue in the matter.
Okay.
Where the lawsuit goes in, all of his requests have been complied with. Not timely, when the 5 business days could not do it. What his lawsuit boils down to at this point is whether or not under the Freedom of Information Act statute involved, if the city of Murphysboro engaged in willful and intentional conduct or otherwise in bad faith in not producing these audio recordings to Mr. Wisely in order for Mr. Wisely to be entitled to a civil penalty against the city, which would range in between $2,500 and $5,000 for each violation. Where the case stands now, the case, Mike Websick represented Mr. Wisely in the ordinance violation case. Ben Yother, if anybody's familiar with him, he was working out of Steve Boston's office at one time. He then went to work, Mr. Yother then went to work for Land of Lincoln. So the case kind of sat idle for a long time when Mr. Yother went to work for Land of Lincoln. And then Rex Burke has now entered his appearance in the FOI case. Where the case sits right now, Mr. Burke has filed what we call a motion for summary judgment in that case. What a motion for summary judgment is, in kind of in a nutshell, it would say that based on the facts of the case, there are no disputes, and based on those undisputed facts, he's entitled to a ruling in his favor as a matter of law. We're in the process of preparing our response to that motion to dismiss, which we say this is a question of intent and bad faith, which we of course dispute, and you can't decide it in a motion for summary judgment. And we're putting together affidavits of everyone who is involved, which is Sandra, Brian, Ed, Ben, and Joyce, who is currently the city clerk at the time, and responds. So that's the status of where we're at. And answer your question, yes, we're still involved in that case.
So you wanna add, do you wanna add those things too?
That's a short answer. Yeah, well,
You wanna
that's a
still-
different story, but it does look bad. I have had a lot of complaints, and what's good for one's good for all, so I don't know. We'll just
All right.
leave it at that for
What's
now.
your opinion, Mr. Blake, on that, on what might?
We would have to look at the statute if it would apply in this circumstance, to where there is a requirement of, there's certain circumstances, like if Eric was here, he would know more so than I do, but I think that's a requirement in the industrial, by zoning, it's a requirement in industrial zone, where you have the requirement of fencing and then the, blocked off fencing to, which, of course, Mr. Cripps, where he's at, he's in the industrial zone. So I know that particular provision of the zoning that requires it applies. Elsewhere, I'm not sure exactly where that requirement falls in place under the city code.
Surely he's in the same zoning as
It's-
Mr. Beckman,
Yeah.
correct?
He is, yes, that's,
Okay,
that's
we can
B2
move
zoning.
forward.
B1 zoning.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other requests from the alderman? Any public comment? With that, we can close public improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Bastian. Takes Public Works, chaired by Mr. Dan Bratt.
There's no old business. The new business is update on the manufactured gas plant project, remediation project. I went to check with Eric, and I didn't get that taken care of today, because I looked like they're hauling out the 3 big tankers, but, Harold?
Yeah, we've had some meetings with them. We've got a meeting tomorrow with them to discuss damages to the roadways caused during the project. And I do know that they're essentially done, I believe, with the exception of hauling in the final cover. I think the final cover, they're putting 2 foot of dirt over the rock that's there. So, we talked about trying to do this year, but obviously there's some oil and chipping and repairs to the streets that are gonna have to be done, so that's not gonna happen this year, so. But I think that's where they're at right now on.
Okay, so they're gonna put 2 foot of dirt on top of all the rock down there?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Now, of course, the city still has a water line to reconnect that goes underneath the river, which really can't get to because of the level of the river. So that's been disconnected for some time.
Several months.
Yeah, you had a
They have to do that to complete the project.
yeah, you had a contractor come in, follow up construction out of Marion. I mean, essentially, we disconnected it in order to remove about dirt to 20-foot depth in that area. So that's what we're waiting on there, is just the river level to drop for them to be able to get back in there.
All right.
Any comment from the council? Public comment, come out of Public Works.
Takes Public Safety, chaired by Mr. Russell Brown.
The whole business discussion regarding Gillenberg property.
Nothing new. No discussion.
You're done, short?
On the new business, don't have anything. Public comment.
I just had a question, so is he waiting for the county to decide what they're gonna do before
That
he
is correct.
pursues to tear his?
Yep.
All right, that takes personnel, chaired by Ms. Barbara Hughes. We have no old business there, we have no new business there. Is there any public comment regarding personnel? Come out of Personnel Committee. That takes us to the mayor's report. We have meetings, of course, in December, one of which falls on Christmas Eve. I'm presuming we would want to rearrange our calendar for meetings due to that. One suggestion might be just to host our meetings on the Mondays, the 9th and the 23rd. I don't know, Ms. Ripley, does that satisfy the, you're gonna be in town, I suppose, and everything else? Anybody else got any issue with that, Mr. Urvis?
Do we have any budget hearings that we have to conduct?
Well, we will.
We will, once it gets approved.
So we don't know when those will be. We might wanna try to do those at the same time.
Well, yes, certainly. I just, so is everybody all right with the 9th and the 23rd, or do we want to consider some other option? Mr. Bastian?
Well, I was just thinking the 10th is a regular meeting, we could do the 10th, which is the Tuesday, and then change the,
Then do it 17th.
then to do the 23rd, you know, the Monday on the 23rd,
Why on the
Christmas
23rd?
week.
No.
Because that's what he said, I don't know.
I don't know,
I don't care, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's really no reason to move the first one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't understand why
Okay.
they moved the first one.
Well, it's just consistency's sake, I suppose, but yeah, we could just have the meeting on the 10th and the other one on the 23rd, or the 10th and the 17th, 3rd and the 17th, I don't care. If you just
Oh, the
want me to-
3rd and the 17th, they both are on a Tuesday?
Yeah, that'd work better for me.
2 weeks, that's fine with me as well.
Yeah, the first part,
Couple
and
days
then
before Christmas.
whenever
I get
we
pretty
just do
busy.
the final budget.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so do we have a motion to move those to the 3rd and 17th?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Say the 3rd and 17th.
3rd and 17th.
Yeah, the Tuesday, 6 p.m.
12/3, 12/17.
Yeah, then we just have the final budget. Can be any given day.
Oh, November. Yeah, we'd have meetings 2 weeks in a row. We're gonna have plenty of meetings that month anyway, likely for a bunch of stuff. All right, so that's what it'll be. That takes us to council member requests. I'll go to Mr. Brown. Mr. Pearson.
No.
Mr. McComb. Clerk Hunsaker. Mr. Urvis.
Not tonight.
Mr. Bratton.
I'd like to thank Patrick for being here tonight. That's it.
All right. Mr. Bastian.
No.
Ms. Campbell's.
Happy Tuesday.
Okay. Mr. Pittman.
No.
All right, that takes department head request, Attorney Blake. Ms. Ripley. Mr. Evans.
No.
Mr. Shepherd.
Nothing, no.
Chief McBride.
I'd like to share a letter I received from Metropolis Public Safety. Dear Chief McBride, on behalf of the men and women of the Metropolis Fire Department, we'd like to express our heartfelt thanks for the assistance in handling our day-to-day operations following the loss of Captain Parker. They had a captain that passed away unexpectedly. With the help of your department, not only were we able to mourn Captain Parker, we were also able to assist the Parker family with funeral service that showed the family how beloved and respected he was within not only the fire service but the community as a whole. As difficult as it was with the help of local departments, it surely would have been intolerable to cover the shifts in addition to planning and attending visitation and funeral. While the possibility of line of duty deaths is always in the back of our mind, any sudden and unexpected loss of one of your own hits everyone hard. Though I pray to God it never happens in your department, rest assured you'll have the full support of the Metropolis Fire Department should the need ever arise. From Harry Massey, the Public Safety Director. In a nutshell, a mutual aid call went out to assist Metropolis in covering fire service during
for about 4 days during this, this funeral going on. And firefighter Murphy went down, covered 12 hours, and firefighter Alexander went down and covered actually 48 hours himself, 2 solid days, running calls in Metropolis Fire Department on their own. They received no compensation for this, so that the firefighters in Metropolis could mourn the loss of one of their own and still maintain services to the city. So they should be commended.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Chief Elmeyer?
Nothing.
All right. Mills?
Nothing.
Mr. Lee? Ms. Volley? I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, nothing.
Mr. Stewart? Ms. Bryant? Okay. All right, we do need an executive session this evening to approve some right-of-ways and a couple of other issues here. And so I will call a 5-minute recess, and when we come back, we'll go into executive session.
You check into that, because I'm gonna pursue that, because I know it's a bad.